I don't know where we should sit. Yeah, I went Google says to me, what is this go on them? So in number 19 practice good. Yeah, I'll close you up. Good. Hello everyone. Hello. Oh, we haven't got enough seats. I feel as though I should be saying. Can we sit on the sofa? I get into trouble for doing that. Well done, and thank you so much for joining us here. Great to see so many of you on the Saturday, and I'm delighted that we have we've got the opportunity to talk to two, but in my life, two really important people. One of whom is Olaf, who you will know from Grand Design, which is a series on Channel 4, which has been running since the last millennium, and Olaf and Frissa, somewhere here too, actually built a house, a triangular house in Sussex. It is Sussex, isn't it?
Sussex, yeah.
Yeah. And next to a railway, next to a road, different side. And it was a wonderful project which embodied so much in the way of interesting craftsmanship. A house built effectively by Olaf, friends, but your great project. And Olaf is a fabulous worker of timber, a maker of things in wood. And to my right here, Sebastian Cox. And Sebastian, we have an event here, a little thing called Green Heroes. It's part of Grand Design's life. We've been doing that since about 2005 or something. And Sebastian was one of our very first exhibitors. And we found this chair which Sebastian made, which was made exquisitely, this lightweight dining chair made and exquisitely finished too, out of underwoods. A coppiced hazel, yeah. So it was coppiced hazel, which is cut so that the bowl and the roots remain in the ground and that the hazel weed grows. And traditionally, trees like hazel were grown in such a way that they were used long, straight growth, for which people can make things like pieces of furniture. Ash would be going long and straight to make spokes of wagons and other things too. And if you look at the way the chairs are made, you'll discover that different timbers have different properties and used for different things. And looking at Sebastian's work, it for me was a revelation, because I realized that here was something which represented not simply the exploration of traditional ideas and craftsmanship, but which also kind of was part of a reawakening, a movement in manufacturing and making, using the resources that we have in this country around us. I'm very excited by the company set up and by the sewing bee presenter, Patrick, called Community Clothing, which amazingly enough is a thoughtful, sustainable, often organic clothing manufactured for amazing prices in the UK. And it tells us that we don't need to make everything on the other side of the planet. We don't need to exploit labour. We can generate from the resources we have in this country, and we can help, therefore, traditional crafts, talents, and skills to thrive and continue and survive. And that's what these guys are about. Now, the premise for all of this, for me, is about the Grand Designs, is all about making and doing. When you watch somebody build a house, you are witnessing one of the very few opportunities any of us in our lives gets to either commission something or to make something. And it's really rare. The rest of the city buy stuff online, right? That's normal. Somebody said to me in 2004, exhibitions are dead. No one wants to go to an exhibition anymore because the internet will sell you everything. And then somebody else said to me, oh yes, but you can't touch stuff on the internet. Well, I thought, yes, you're right about that. That kept the flame alive for me. And then I remembered something else, which is that objects aren't just things that you buy, they are also embodiments of human energy. The critic Charles Moore said that a house, a good building, should be able to absorb vast amounts of information and energy on the way through. And then repay that energy over time with interest. So any good object, that's a chair by Sebastian, the house that Olaf has made, are both physical containers of human energy, and they radiate that energy when they're good. They give it back. And the best thing about that is that if you come to this show and you meet somebody like Sebastian or Olaf, you meet an architect, you meet an engineer. There are some steel companies here making bits of buildings. You meet a craftsman, a woman. You meet the maker of table mats or of tables. You have closed the loop. If you commission, and I have bought a set of table mats at Grand Designs Line, and I can tell you, I love them still because I spent half an hour talking to the ladies that make them. And for her that was helpful, and for me it was important because these aren't just objects. The objects themselves are the conduits to human relationships. Now this sounds like nuts because the rest of us don't really enjoy much of this in our lives. Our dining, our cutlery and our crockery and our stuff, our furniture, it's from catalogues or maybe we got it second-hand, whatever. But if you meet a maker, if you meet somebody who's made something, spent hours and weeks and months of their life crafting something for you, and there's been an exchange, a contract there to entered into, the object becomes the embodiment of memory. The object has within it that human energy, their love, their time, their care. And that's what we're here to explore today. I didn't mean to say any of this. I was going to start with a quote from a book, but for me, craftsmanship is why I'm doing my job. It's that simple. What I love about buildings is that when they are well made, they are embodiments of this energy, and they are things that we can judge in terms of the quality of their design and the quality of their craftsmanship, the quality of their making. Taste has got nothing to do with it. My taste is not your taste, and your taste is not the same as a brand's taste, and your brand's taste isn't the same age 90 as it was when she was 50. So taste was really unreliable because our own tastes change. But what we can all do objectively, we can recognize when something is well made and when it's well designed. And I think that's a different thing. And again, I think that's what Grand Design's Rise is really about. So I'm going to stop talking. And we've got some slides, by the way. Any still picture that you see is going to be from Sebastian, and any moving picture is from Olaf. So you'll get a sense of their work and their interests and love. But Sebastian, tell me first of all, I haven't seen you for a couple of decades. So I want to know, are you still making copies for furniture?
Yeah, we are. So actually, this is our Woodland. I guess that's one of the things that makes me slightly different as a furniture maker, is that I have access to woodlands. Started off when I was a student, coppicing the local forestry commission wood. I got a permit to harvest for £5 and I can glean hazel.
£5?
£5. Take as much hazel as I wanted because actually they were felling the understory to get to the oaks. And that was the sort of origin story of my business, was that this material was, as you described it beautifully, decades, centuries, millennia of craft heritage. Actually, at the moment, it's just a bit of a problem. It's kind of in the way for value product. So I started with that, and now we just basically buy standing wood around Kent near my workshop. And coppice wood is very much still a part of my story. We tend to make bigger things these days, and as you know, the chair was very light and small, but if someone wants a dining table, coppice wood does become a problem. So we use other broadleaf trees, but we've sort of established a business which is about only using British wood and only using solid wood. And for me, the exciting part, apart from the fact that when you buy a piece of my furniture, as Kevin describes, you buy a piece of my soul. Yeah. But actually, you also regenerate the habitat in these places, which are our woodlands, which are way too neglected. In the UK, we import something like 85% of the wood that we use here. We're the second largest importer of wood next to China by volume, and yet within our native woodlands, biodiversity is declining. Since the Second World War, woodland cover in the UK has gone up, biodiversity within woodlands has gone down, which tells you that we don't just need more trees, we need to be also managing them. So that's where my business comes in, is not just an opportunity to create a beautiful thing and have a meaningful relationship with the client, but actually have a conduit through which we can improve our countryside and save wildlife in these spaces. And quickly, before... But there's in that woodland, and it might come up in a second, we started coppicing it. First time we coppiced it in 25 years. And the summer after we cut it, the whole woodland was pink with foxbugs. And I had no idea they were going to be in there. And that's because there are these evolved species that live within our native forests. which can wait decades for trees to be cut. And then the following winter, we spotted a dormouse nest in the brambles. Now that's a red listed species, which through the activity of my furniture making in our workshop, we were giving a habitat to. So buying from the UK or from, you can really begin to influence these things beyond just the notion of having a nice exchange with a maker.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because we tend to think of woodland just being something which is purely natural. And actually, I think there's very, very little ancient woodland in the UK. Nearly all of it has been managed over the past 10, 15, 30 years.
There's no primeval woodland.
There's no primeval woodland. And therefore, that the contents of the mix and the biodiversity of that woodland actually relies on us.
Yep, it does.
And it relies on management.
It does. And the thing that's extraordinary about that is it's an accident. And the accident is that our chainsaws and previously our axes mimic the pushing behavior of woolly mammoths. So in temperate forests, we have a space, an ecosystem that is adapted to giant herbivores, which are now absent. So we sort of accidentally have mimicked these giant herbivores, and that's why managed woodlands are biodiverse.
I didn't know that. That's amazing.
It's amazing, but like Oliver Rackham is like the...
Oliver Rackham. Yeah. He was my senior tutor.
Really?
Yeah.
Cool.
At university, absolutely.
So I am a proxy beaver or a proxy bison or a proxy woolly mammoth. That's my main job.
We're talking about Oliver Rackham later.
Yeah.
Well, I'm a hugely important naturalist. He used to wear sandals in the middle of winter.
Yeah.
But I didn't know about the woolly mammoth. I do know that if you mow a wildflower meadow, it will encourage, of course, and if you mow it at the right time, it encourages the growth of the wild species. However, what really encourages the growth of the wild species is especially sheep or horses eating the plants, because the wild species have evolved to resist the tearing and pulling motion of the mouse, of the animal, and they root differently as a response to that than if they are simply mown. And so you get a different flora where you get animals doing that as opposed to machinery. But your machinery magically mimics the animals. That's great. That's
Lucky me.
Yeah,
it's one of the few instances where human interventions in a landscape can have a positive effect. There's not many of that, so I'm pretty lucky to be doing that.
I love that story, and it sort of comes back to the point that so often when you buy a pair of jeans, you're buying a name or a brand, and you're not. Actually, it's just invented. The stories are invented, whereas you don't need to invent your stories.
Our marketing budget is tiny.
Yeah, because it's the stories inherent in everything you do. Olaf, I want to throw this in a different direction, because one of the things about your house is to move away slightly from timber at the moment. Well, I have a photograph. I'm giving a talk later on this afternoon about a series. There's a photograph of you and Brither in it, and there's a photograph beside the building, and there are some just engineering bricks, which are just straightforward, cheap as chips, blue engineering bricks. They're just the cheapest bricks you can buy. They're super performing. They're lovely. They're almost no character per se. And then just beneath there's a bit of an entrance with a timber blockwork wall, a bit like a sort of butcher's block. And below that was some paper, but the paper's made out of ordinary concrete block. What Olaf did was lay those concrete blocks in a beautiful tessellated pattern, elegantly, tightly, so as to turn a basic, again, cheap as chips product into something exquisite with this and two of these. And that blockwork wall is made out of leftover timber from your workshop, which you turn into a wall with one of these and two of these. And the rest of us would just throw that stuff in the skip. The bricks are laid, I think, with a 6mm gap. So, the bond is not an 8 to 10mm water bond, it's a 6mm bond. It's exquisite, it's mathematical. Again, it's not necessary, not normal, but it takes a basic material and turns it into something exquisite. Sebastian's work, Olaf's work, takes raw materials, whether it's a piece of tree or a piece of stone or a bit of cooked earth, basic raw materials from the planet that the rest of us would probably treat with contempt, or at least with very little levels of skill to produce something quite ugly. And with one of these and two of these, and actually quite a lot of that, you're able to turn it into something beautiful. Now, I want to know what it takes for you to do that, why you do that. Well, it was kind of, the concrete block driveway was kind of by accident. I ran my mum's house and my old mum's house. I thought it was a paving slab wall, just sort of like just plugged together. There wasn't any cement in it. And she wanted rid of it, and I put some sleepers in the way, and then used these paving slabs to make a herringbone patio. But I ran out, but then I took one to the local sort of paving slab guy, and he said, that's not a paving slab, that's just a 2-inch concrete block from like the 1950s or 60s, I'm not sure exactly, which they don't make anymore. So he was like, you need to buy like a 3-inch or 4-inch concrete block. So I leave the patio, and then years later, obviously, it came down to building my massive driveway because I couldn't build, I couldn't have anything on it because of the, I built on it because of the sewer. So then, I sort of remember what I did and thought, right, I'll go with that, and I made it permeable as well by having gaps in it, like a normal block paving thing. And so in fact, it's in a way, it's exigency. It's kind of like a circumstance. Yeah, and if you don't have a lot of cash, you kind of, I suppose it's that difference between checkbook architecture and trying to work your way out of a problem. By thinking about it, your hand is forced almost in a way. To use your initiative to come up with something. That's the. And what do you think makes craftsmanship? What do you think it is that?
I think it is. Understanding materials to a certain degree, and then using your initiative to create something that, in your mind's eye, what could be potentially beautiful and functions. Form and function. There's always a balance of if you push it too far one way, it's not going to work. Or if you push it too far the other way, it's not going to look beautiful, or it's just
Yeah, I was going to, earlier on, I mentioned a book I read a few years ago, which is called The Craftsman, by Richard Sennett, who's an American philosopher, and he read a series of books about human activity. And he described craftsmanship as being something that you do for a long time. That, in a way, you learn a skill set, or a bunch of skill sets, working with materials, and it takes about 10,000 hours, roughly 3 years. And his view was that if you're a parent and you've got young children, it roughly takes 3 years to get to a point where you know what you're doing. I don't know, you tell me.
I think I'm there. She's 4 now, so I don't always slips though, doesn't it? It
always slips. Exactly. And he said, actually, you can be a good parent, and that's a craft, and you can be a computer programmer, and that's a craft. And he said there was a kind of moment where you'd stop, as it were, fighting what you're doing, and you're suddenly able to dream it, the language of it, or you're able to tell a joke with it elegantly, and there is a moment at which it becomes elegant, and then it's that point of what they used to call, the end of your journey, but apprenticeship, where you make your masterpiece, and the masterpiece as a craftsperson is the thing in which you finally excel. And I suppose the way you talk about laying your mum's pavement, well, that implies that you've been actually working with those concrete blocks for years, one way or another. You come
I didn't know what they were.
You come to sort of be able to have fun.
I remember seeing my first ever member of staff, who was a graduate from a furniture making course, use a router along. He was running a rebate along a piece of wood, and he did it. And he'd been working for me about 2.5 years. And he kind of did it, and it's like, it went into the wood, and glided the router along, and it came out perfect, with no burns, no flash, nothing. Just like, George, you just hit the moment, the craftsmanship thing. That was awesome. And he could feel it. And sometimes when you're doing that, when you get a new tool, it does take you a little while, but then once a couple of days, and then you suddenly get that smoothness, that sort of like, I think Richard Sennett also describes the flow state that comes with craft.
The thing that happens in here.
That thing where you're not really distracted by the radio or your own thoughts, you're just doing. You're in the zone.
I can't remember who's invented flow. Somebody will tell me in a second. The psychologist invented flow theory. The idea that you sort of, you're at that point almost only half there, aren't you? You're doing it because there's a half of your brain which is as it were, switching off. I mean, you're simply in the moment of the process, which is beautiful. I don't think you get that with concrete blocks, do you?
No.
But
That
to
was
be fair, though,
relentless.
you're a man of wood. I mean,
Yeah.
like Sebastian, you both operate with the same palette of material. And do you feel that? Do you feel that there's a moment where you feel always lost in the process of what you're doing?
Yes, sometimes.
Until the phone rings.
Or my arm starts hurting or something like that,
yeah.
Yeah, reality of getting old, so it kicks in.
Yeah.
But no, yeah, you're getting in like a zen
Exactly.
with the product.
Yeah. Exactly. There's that moment where you just feel utterly, in a way, being at peace with them. You're not fighting it anymore.
No.
You just you know what to do.
And understanding how it's working in front of you.
Yeah. And that's the other thing I'd say, I suppose. I mean, if you're a potter, you'll be across the hundreds of different types of clay that you might be able to use, or the glazes, or the slips. If you work in brick, you'll understand 40 different mortar mixes and the subtleties of the composition. And if you work in timber, you'll know exactly which part of which tree is going to be appropriate for the job in hand, whenever it is you're making out of that material. And I think there is a degree to which we all accept, if we buy a kitchen cabinet or a piece of furniture, somehow it's just, it's wood. Where's that from? I think it's from trees. Which bit of the tree? No, middle bit, baby. Not the leaves.
Yeah.
And that's the extent of the knowledge that most of us have.
Yeah, but even with us, it's a constant learning process.
Well, what I mean is, the difference between quartz sawn oak and any other kind of saw. You know the properties of a piece of ash. You know the properties of a piece of sycamore. And you know how well it'll clean, how well it'll finish, where it's pregnant to use that part of the tree and that other part. And this knowledge is necessary because man did not evolve to provide us with timber. The biology of trees serves very different purposes and different locations and different functions, and yet you can spot the strengths and weaknesses of that in work that you do. Yeah. And I think that has to be a component. There's little of handling those materials, knowing.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think, though, it's important also to not put too much of a romantic halo around craftsmanship as well, because I think that there's sort of, craftsmanship, we're talking about a very pure form, it is that, but actually it's very important that there are bridges built to then just make it and craft, because I feel sometimes what's just as important is that our clients have a sympathetic understanding of a material, even on a sort of basic level. And so I think the way that making plays into that, and I love that Nick, I don't know, it sounds that you can turn your hands to many materials, mine very much is wood. That idea, when I'm working with wood, I'm a craftsman, but then when I'm throwing a pot, as being a maker, and that sort of bridge back between expertise, naivety, and play and fun. And I think that's really important that we also understand that where craftsmanship sits within the web and network of craft or making.
That's a really good point, that the craft is a human process, and that it's about exploration and about trying stuff out and having fun with it as much as being serious. And then they'll come on to, I think, the business applications of, how you promote craftsmanship, which I think is important. I interviewed 30 years ago a man who was in his 80s then, and he's no longer with us, in Devon, who was a cob expert. He began life as an apprentice to a plumber, and his job in the 1930s was to go around when they were plumbing houses for the first time, putting in water. He'd go around and his plumber boss would make him repair the cob walls that they pushed into pipes. Right. And he said, well, and then I started building cob houses because not many people were doing it. And then one day he retired, and then 10 years later, English Heritage knocked on his door and said, we understand you're the last remaining person in Britain who knows how to build in cob. Can you please teach us? Wow. And now you've got Kevin McCabe, and you've got other people, and you've got, there are interesting people exhibiting here, building cob. And this industry that's grown from nothing, from this one guy, this one man who was this last remaining link with that tradition. It reminds me that Carpenter Oak and Woodland, that timber frame company making oak frames like that one over there. started by Rob James, an architect, learned everything they knew about oak timber framing from repairing church and cathedral roofs. Not because somebody taught them, because that plant had died. So they had to learn it all over again from the existing examples. So it's not as though you could go to a library and just find the book, because, the art of the underwoodsman, and the bodgers and the chairmakers of the forests of the Chilterns, all of this knowledge and craft skill was handed down. It was forever, it was taught, it was shown, and you did it, and you learned, and you got it wrong, and then you got it right eventually, and then you became good at what you did. And it just strikes me that we've got to keep stuff alive. We've got to show it, and you've got to promote it, because if we don't, nobody will buy it. People who work for you will drift off and do other things. And now you build a business, Sebastian, which is based on these very strong principles. As you say, your marketing is restoring. That's simple. And that's a hugely inspirational piece. The marketing is a hugely inspirational story. And that you're moving into online stuff, videos, tutorials, YouTube stuff. And I think that's intriguing, because in a way, were you to write a book, the chances are it would remain on the library bookshelf, and it might get read one day by somebody with to pick up a whole new set of skills. But really, actually, what the internet is doing for you is providing you an opportunity to almost like train people through the show and tell medium.
Yeah, and because I think, especially in construction, there's a distinct lack of skill being passed on, because there aren't the youngsters coming up. I think I saw a statistic a while back saying that for every 50 people retiring from construction, and they're taking all their skills with them, there's only 7 people coming in to replace them, which is dire. So it's a worry for the industry. But if I can do something that can inspire in that way, then hopefully, we can change those numbers.
I'm very struck that in for example, in France, you build a house and you don't employ a general builder or a carpenter. You might work with a carpentry joinery firm, and then you will work with a masonry firm, and then you will work with they call them sink workers, who are basically roofers and lead workers and gutters and all that work of the fittings and fixtures, as it were, in the building. Those are the traditional kind of groupings of skills. You've worked across all of these. Which do you happily most easily fit into? The timber work?
The timber work, absolutely. Yeah, that's where I feel at home.
Actually, on your project, I remember you brought in some help with the brickwork. You had a mate did come and do the masonry.
Yes, he did,
and you had a mate come and do the roofing. In fact,
who was French?
It was French,
It was a zinc worker.
Zinc worker who came out of that tradition. So, intriguingly, your project fell into those very traditional, almost medieval disciplines of metal, wood, stone, which sound like very kind of primal areas of craft, but they are. Where do you think that craftsmanship finds a place in the modern world? Where do you think it can best sit, given the focus of everything being digital?
I think it's there. It just needs to be encouraged.
It becomes almost the antidote. Is my view. That's how we all, I think, yearn for more connection with the material world, like things and objects, and that's where we were talking earlier about childhood experiences and exposures and workshops, and kind of the idea of going in and being familiar with making is a thing that happens
hands-on.
I think that's where it becomes really potent. Is so much of what we even consume these days is on the screen, isn't it? And actually becomes the antidote to the serious thing.
And I think also that in this country, I think we have the greatest number of historic buildings of anywhere in Europe, except from the Middle Ages onwards, right? And And bizarrely, although many of us love having super-fast broadband and massive compressors, would start on their first day making the tools that they would then be using for the rest of their lives. And there's a process whereby that connection to the material through the hand, so that you feel the vibration and you suffer the rock when you hit your finger instead of the piece of wood. That is absent from a gaming culture, or from even driving an electric car. There's no sense of the tangible or of the controlling the world, or being able to mold it in any way or shape, which there is with wood and stone and metal.
Was it David Tye, the carver, who wrote about craft as the management of risk? That idea of, like to give the idea of an electric car and a classic car. The classic car is more interesting, exciting, and everything, because there are risks of breakdown. It's potentially less reliable. There's more feedback from the road. All of those things. And I think that's one of the things that I love about working with your hands. It keeps you very humble in a way, because you can do something particularly with wood and think you do all the right things, and then at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon it just humbles you by cupping or warping or whatever, and you've undone your entire day.
So it gets you back sometimes.
You find yourself sort of reaching for undo, and it doesn't exist. And then
well, how do I find that previous version that
exactly.
saves me?
There is no previous version of this table that I've just screwed up.
It's like this table I'm making in the background. You saw it, didn't you, Kevin, when you came round? It massively cut over the 2 years that I'd had it in the dining room. And then we planed a massive section off the back of it. And then overnight I went back and it had cut another 3 mil. Just being under tension and just taking more meat out of it. It's just it's just constantly live, and
that's the thing as well.
It should never have moved, but it did.
It did, exactly. And that's the thing, the kind of amazing thing about these sort of craft processes. Then I think we scientifically understand so little about this material in terms of its behaviour. So many other things that we understand it, molecular.
We can X-ray stainless steel.
You can work with this stuff for a lifetime and still not really knowing it. And still
there's a mystery to it.
Still surprises you.
I like that. I say almost in every session on stage here that I'm amazed anybody ever builds or makes anything, because sometimes the world can be so complex. You can be building a house is an extremely complex machine. So remarkable, very high, and you just about get something decent. And the rest of us are utterly dependent on you. These outliers, you are these outlier individuals who are kind of pushing, experimenting, trying, using this world of knowledge, this lifetime of accumulated expertise to create something that you believe is going to work. Occasionally it doesn't.
Yes.
But mostly it does, and when it does, it's like watching a magician, because the rest of us couldn't even get anywhere near, And I find that fascinating. It's like, listening to a rocket scientist or nuclear physicist talking about their reactor or something, It's a world away. And it's magical, because at the very same time it isn't nuclear physics. It's not abstruse. It's working with the real materials that the Earth and the planet and our mantle of atmosphere provides. And it's, to take something formed in the ground has taken 500 million years to turn into a piece of marble, or limestone, and to carve it into a shape. I do close my head when I begin to think about it,
So I'm a little uncomfortable with being put on a platform right now. I think that's I think we can all do that. That's one of the things that
you say that.
With enough time, application, dedication, most people these days. I mean, it's interesting that most men these days can cook, but generations ago, which is a craft, and most generations ago, most men would have said, "Well, I'm going to do that." So I'm a little uncomfortable with the platform thing, because I feel like, I'm not that special as being able to do it. But it is magic when you get there, or even part of the way there, making something for yourself, and then eventually making something where you're good enough to be able to say, I'm going to charge you some money for this thing. And that is a journey that we could all go on. I don't like being put up on a pedestal like that.
Okay, I didn't think you
He's
would.
got imposter syndrome as well.
Yeah, I didn't think either of you would, which is why I got you here. I wonder what you'd say was, this is another defining quality of craftsmen and women, of craftsmanship, is the natural humility. Because they feel that they're on this journey of exploration, and that it's not over, that there's always more to learn. But they do it so much better than us. And I did a piece, my director said to me, would you climb up on the roof and work with the roofer and learn how to cut a piece of slate, or would you go off to this flint expert who cuts flint for a living, he now split into little cubes, and he can teach you what you learn. And I said, well, I'll do it happily, but I'm gonna cock it up. And in a way, I'm really happy to cock it up. And that's the inevitable outcome, because some of you spend 20 years tapping flint, and you can just do this and then end up with a cube in their hand. Then again, it's like watching sorcery. Because when I tried it, I was with him and I followed every step. I ended up literally with a pile of 100 different little shards and no cube, just pressure. Because you cannot just learn something bit by bit. And you can buy. I mean, I'm giving you extreme examples here. We can all pick up a piece of wood and saw it up and learn how to plane and learn how to sand and learn how to put a beautiful butterfly, whatever it is, in cinch thing. Lovely. But it all takes time, doesn't it? It takes time and effort and energy and patience.
And also failure along the way.
Failure along the way. So how do you, when you take on an apprentice, when you bring a new guy in who's just wants to learn, when you do a YouTube video on a particular piece of building process, how do you protect the enthusiasm of those people that are joining you for the first time? How do you regard them to say, it's okay, because you'll do something good here, but it might not be like this. I mean, do you kind of give positive input? Do you try encourage? How do you?
You have to encourage, because it can be demoralising along the way if you're constantly cocking it up and getting it wrong. And you feel like you're not getting anywhere. But perseverance is key. And, if you love something enough, then it will come.
It's a fine line, though, isn't it? Between you've got to also hold them back. And sort of do a really important part of the apprenticeship is to do a lot of boring work. Actually. And there's a bit of holding back. I think a costing apprenticeship traditionally was 7 years.
Still learns how to coppice.
Wow.
It's just like learning how to build.
How to be a woodman. So in terms of
How to be a wood.
coppicing the hazel, bleaching it, flashing it, whatever you do, managing the wood and making the furniture. And so obviously we just focus. We do an apprentice every year. We do an apprenticeship every year. So we always have a new one. We have a year 2 and then a year 3, which is really nice, and there's a continuity through them. And they can see what's ahead, but you also hold them back a bit. Enthusiasm is really, really important, but you've got to not let them fail too much too early and let them build themselves up. And I think that's a really important thing. Is one of the things we're talking about here when we talk about craftsmanship. It's the time, isn't it? It's whether it's time learning to do it, the time it takes to make it that makes the product expensive, or any of those things. Effectively, named for this time. And so it should take 3 years before you get to that point where you are working with me on a high-end commission. But there's always things to do along the way. So there's typically lots of sanding and oiling, or cleaning up the glue ups, those sorts of things, learning to plane wood. There's always loads to do. And I sometimes see in construction, you see apprentices who are forced because they're not given enough to do as well. I had an electrician wiring up my new workshop, and amazing job, incredible craft. The apprentice basically just stood there watching. And I was kind of thinking, wow, I suppose maybe there's regulation issues around that or something. But for me, it was very much, it's always been get involved and then get bored, get involved. So it's been,
I mean, how do you then, with digital mean, make and explain a process in such a way as to also say to people, look, You can learn to make an omelette in 3 minutes on the internet. You know, so there are some. This is why cooking works so well on television. It's quick, but some of these processes take a while to master, to get right. And how do you manage people's expectations?
I don't really. I just put it out there. I try to explain what I'm doing at the time. Whether someone understands it or you know, there's a certain level of skill set you have to have. Toolage, space, a workshop probably. So some of the stuff I do is intrinsically difficult. I think it's self-explanatory that it's fairly difficult to do in your living room, sort of thing. But I don't know about managing expectations.
A really good piece of craft expectation management experience was I did a flint knapping course with an amazing guy who lived a prehistoric life. His name's Will Lord. Just find him on Instagram. Kind of dresses up as a caveman, goes to school and scares kids.
Wasn't the same guy that I met with.
He's amazing. Very different type of flint knapping. You make an axe, and he says at the beginning of the course, he says, "Thank you for paying money to come to the course with me. This piece of flint, you are unlikely to leave with an axe, but you will leave with a very healthy expectation of how difficult flint knapping is." And I thought, okay, and
cool.
I just took some of the sharp flints.
Yes.
That was my axe. Lots of raspberries up with it.
That's all any of us can hope to find in the ground, isn't it? Some other bits of leftovers. I'm really fascinated by this kind of expectation. But it's big, because it's like, on the one hand, we everybody in this room has respect for the traditions that you represent, because they're in this room. That's what this exhibition sort of represent. Whether they're intending to learn it, do it, or grow up to be, you know, somebody with a great skill set, use their hands, or whether they're willing to engage as clients. And I think that is, for me, the thing is that it's easier to use that rather tricky word. It's a bit of a journey. It's a journey for us as consumers to reacquaint ourselves with the well-made thing. And it's a bit of a journey for us to kind of come to respect and value the energy that goes into it. It's a journey, certainly, if we're going to try and learn how to do it, how we might ourselves need to practice. But how do you think you then can inspire people? And I don't just mean apprentices, I mean, you know, anybody, an 8-year-old or somebody who wants to buy a table. You know, how do you inspire? How do you communicate the?
Well, I think, you know, social media is sort of taken over the world, isn't it? So I think, you know, using that space to try and encourage and inspire is the way forward. I think, you know, get onto the screens that these kids are watching.
Yeah, and
try not to swear.
But the first step, presumably, is to let people know your phone number, address, and the Instagram sign.
Pretty much.
Do you have an Instagram sign, or do you send people illustrated books?
No, we do catalogs. We do exhibitions. We've got Instagram. But interestingly, the thing that people like most on my Instagram feed is not product, but it's when I do workshop tours. You know, whole phone walk around workshop. And that's what people don't do. This gets our highest engagement. If we put a picture of that kitchen up, and you know that picture did get quite a lot.
Oh, I know that because I filmed it. That's Upper House of the Year.
Max and Lucy.
Beautiful.
Thank you. But you know, the kind of big reveal image, obviously, good engagement, but actually the making of, the way more interested in that. So I think in terms of aspiring people, there is a latent thing in everybody about making materials and reality, and so the reality of the sort of haptic world we can touch it. So it doesn't take very much to sort of trigger that, and the channels like social media or any kind of media do.
Well, this is presumably why people get driven to your sites. It's the idea of making. They see the physical making happening before their eyes.
Yeah, that's the thing.
It's why people watch grand designs.
Yes.
Well, we did with So Finished Houses, we called House of the Year, which is another program. And I think that there is that, and even then we're kind of trying differently to show the process that's involved. And it's a curious thing. It's always putting people back in touch with the physicality of the world that somehow in our collective ancestral memory is still there and really powerful. We want to know how our great-grandparents made wheels or cooked food or made a fire. So these kind of really fine skills, the handling of the world to bend it, to shape it, to help us is kind of, it's been there for what? For a million years, I guess. And it's what you're doing, which is rather cool. So, without further ado, we've got to let everybody, because I'm assuming that at least half the audience here are going to come to you after the thing. Could you make me a chair? Yeah. So, and those that haven't got time to ask you, or are fed up with waiting in the queue, what's your website, Sebastian?
Sebastian Cox, UK.
Sebastian Cox .co.uk. Olaf, how do we find you on the world's of Insta?
So YouTube is Wood and Metal Studios.
Wood and Metal
Studios.
How did you get that?
Nice.
That's a good time. That's good.
Yeah. All you need to add is stone, and you've kind of you've got the full medieval set.
Well, it's more the fact that I like metal music.
Oh, I see.
Little play on words, but I'll add some natural metal into it. Yeah.
No, I don't know many blacksmiths who like heavy wood music. They're into the heavy metal too. Loud enough to hear over the head. Listen, thank you both so much. I really wanted to do this lecture because I can't tell you how much I believe that it cuts right to the quick. It's right at the heart of why I'm here, what I do for a living. I believe why you're here too, because this is what draws viewers and visitors to this exhibition and to watch the series, to see stuff happening. And I keep saying on about the planet. You can only provide us with so much, and we've got to really figure out how we use that. What it provides us really well. I mean, Sebastian said it so beautifully with all that hazel, which we've forgotten how to use. And you're doing it with the combination, which I think is really beautiful and exciting. So thank you. Thank you both for joining us. Thank you for joining us, and please join me in thanking Sebastian and Noah. Thank you.
About just being straight down doing